The final movement we're going to discuss is installation art. And we've touched on this before in the sculpture chapter. And to me, it's such a interesting way of making art. It's a very cutting edge way of making art. And you see a lot of contemporary artists using it. So I like ending on the note of installation. We've talked about how it's environmental, it's immersive, and it really defies what it means to own things, own art, which I think is somewhere that we're going as a culture. You know, how do you really own things in the way that maybe you did 10 or 20 years ago? We're in sort of a like ride share Netflix culture, right? So it is interesting to consider, what does it mean for art? So I want to show you a couple different artists and different groups working with installation. The first one we'll start off with are the YBAs, or the Young British Artists. These were artists who were working together in the 90s, mainly coming out of some of the same art schools in London. And they were creating these very groundbreaking kind of pieces. The first one I want to show you is Damien Hirst, who's really well known for doing these types of works where he takes these animals and presents them like these scientific specimens with these sort of wonky philosophical titles. I love these pieces. I think they're really compelling, but I've also met people who really hate them because of the use of the animals. To me, there's something interesting also about the collision of like art and beauty and science and technology that is necessary to create a work like this. 1,000 Years, for instance, it's a living environment where you have the cow head feeding the maggots that turn into the flies. And so it's literally like a life cycle. This is, again, something much more about science than about beauty. So can you have both of these things sort of existing together in an artistic piece? Hirst asked that kind of question. This is the piece that your book uses, For the Love of God. And I forget exactly how many $1,000,000 this is worth, but a lot. It's real diamonds. It's also a real skull. And so to me, this piece has always been a meditation on, like, you know, you can't take it with you. That's how I read it. That for all the money in the world, it doesn't save you from dying. You know, maybe in the science fiction future that will be different, but right now, you know, you can't stop death. So you can have all these diamonds, but, you know, metaphysically, philosophically, we're all going to go to the ground, right? So I think this is another question he was exploring, as something like For the Love of God. This is Jake and Dinos Chapman. They're another YBA brother pair. And they're known for making these sculptures that are very vivid and often take cues from historical artworks. So this piece, for instance, takes inspiration from Goya, the printmaker that we saw before during Romanticism. And he also creates these very startling installations, like this one from the White Cube Gallery, where he literally actually didn't create the artworks in the gallery. He created the mannequins that you see looking at the art. And again, if you look at them, you'll notice they're Nazis. You know, they're a play on Nazis. In the same show, he had these mannequins that he created that look like they're looking at art, right? And then basically you see the front of their faces and you're like, you know. So there's this sort of sense of this things not being in place when you look at the Chapman's works. This is Silda Morales, a personal favorite of mine, a Brazilian artist. I also love installation because I think it's very global. You see it happening all over the world, not just in one geographical location. He deals a lot with political situations and danger. This piece, for instance, is called Through, but you'll notice there's all these blockades that won't let you go through. So it's, you know, through, but you can't go through. And it's a symbolic way of discussing people that can't move, I think. Political danger. It's a way of doing that without spelling it out to you. It's being, again, much more about concept than anything else. This is a work that I got to see of his in New York called Volatile, where it's lit for the photograph, but in the actual installation, it's very dark. And you can just kind of see the candle in the background. And you walk towards it, you'll notice through this very thick sand. And as you get closer to the candle, you realize you're smelling gas. So it's really about, like, what do we do when we're faced with danger, even when we know it's fake danger? You want to run, right? This is his work, Red Shift. Everything in the room is red. I saw this in person as well. And it's unsettling. Red as a color is very unsettling. We've talked about colors before and what they do to you emotionally, how they work. So you're looking around the room and it's very unsettling. And then you realize there's this spill going back into this back room, that you have this sink that's just running and running and running with this red liquid. When he was asked about this work, he said, it's really actually a political monument to a friend of mine who was taken in Brazil and never seen again. We used to write his name on the wall where he was taken, and they would, we'd write it in red paint, and they would whitewash it every night, and we'd write it again, and they'd take it away. So it's a way of trying to give someone presence when everyone wants to erase them. But it also speaks to the other kind of violence that gets hidden in our cultures, hidden behind doors, hidden behind, politics. It's really quite upsetting when you really think about it. This is Eliana Sui, a Ghanaian artist. He's from Africa, and he works with trash, but he makes these beautiful woven tapestry-like pieces all out of garbage. And I was lucky enough to go to Africa a couple years ago and talk to them a little bit about, their culture and their ideas about garbage and, recycling. And, I talked to an African about recycling, and he seemed sort of mystified because he was like, well, we just reuse everything. What's recycling? Like, we don't throw things away. And I was like, this is a totally different idea of, again, what objects are, how you use them, how you upcycle them, recycle them, reuse them. So he manages to make these really, really cool pieces, again, using like gum wrappers, can lids, and make them really, esoteric kind of aesthetic objects. It's pretty cool stuff. This is Anish Kapoor. He's an Indian artist who's lived most of his life in Britain. And you can see a lot of his inspiration of Hinduism in his pieces, the idea of space and reality and time, things coming into being, things processing. Go back and look at Hinduism and think about Shiva, for instance, the fiery flames of the world destroying the world. And you'll see a lot of circles here, things coming into being, things falling apart when you study his works. So again, really love Anish Kapoor as well. Oop, that's not for you guys. Ignore this. This is for my in-person class.